So it's my pleasure to introduce Henry Chapman, the interim CEO at the YWCA of White Plains and Central Westchester.
Thank you, Tom.
Thank you, Henry.
Thank you. Thank you. Wow. My name's Henry Chapman, and I'm the interim CEO, along with Danielle Ferry, for the YWCA, White Plains, and Central Westchester. It's truly a pleasure to be here, since I haven't been out much since COVID started, at this nonprofit leadership summit. You know, some time ago, Tom Gabriel asked me if I would introduce the next speaker, Maria Imperial. But before I do that, I just want to do a really unscientific survey of how many people in the room know of or have met Maria Imperial. By show of hands. Well, it's seriously on this side of the room, but it looks like about half. She's really a dynamo. And about 7 years ago, I was exploring a career change, and a mutual friend of mine and Maria's said, you know, you should meet Maria Imperial. I didn't know who Maria Imperial was at that time. Well, we met, and at that meeting, it actually changed the trajectory of my career. I think from that moment we met, she was in serious recruitment mode. This was not just a hello, how are you kind of meeting. She was planning, she was scheming. And I know that because since that time, my wife has become a board member of the YWCA. I was kind of sort of wrestled into taking the HR job at the YWCA along with a strategic partner role for Maria. And my children worked there as screeners during the height of the pandemic. This was not accidental. She had a plan. And as you read her bio talks about her accomplishments and her pedigree. Yeah, she's intelligent, no doubt. Harvard undergrad, NYU grad school, Harvard Law School. She's accomplished. CEO YWCA, the creator of the Westchester Center for Racial Equity. She was the executive director at the City Bar Justice Center. You know, her other accomplishments are in your package. I won't bore you with that. But the one thing that her bio does not talk about is who she is. She's very strong. She's committed to advocacy. She's fiercely competitive. Oh my gosh. But at the same time, she's also very thoughtful, she's kind, she's generous, and she's compassionate. Governor Hochul is very lucky to have made this appointment at this time. The rest of us should count our blessings because she's on our side. So, I could go on, but you should see for yourself. So it is my great honor and tremendous pride for me to introduce my friend, New York State Commissioner, Division of Human Rights, Maria Imperial.
Thank you, Henry. Thank you, Henry, so much. I miss you. I miss you. I miss the YWCA. And I miss all of you very much as well. And by the way, I don't see myself as competitive. I grew up playing basketball, so maybe it's in my blood, but I don't know. But thank you anyway. I was so thrilled today when Tom and Faith asked me to come to speak about collaboration and human rights. Since this is the Nonprofit Leadership Summit, you know, I think, is this? I was thinking that was making an echo, having both of them. I have it, yes, okay, great. Since this is the Nonprofit Leadership Summit, I thought I wanted to speak about something near and dear to my heart, about how when nonprofit leaders collaborate, they can enhance and advance human rights. As many of you know, I was a nonprofit leader for 14 years. I was a nonprofit leader before that too, but here in Westchester, I was at the YWCA, White Plains and Central Westchester, for 14 years. The mission of the YWCA is the elimination of racism, the empowerment of women, but the most important part of our mission is the promotion of peace, justice, freedom, and dignity for all. Promoting peace, justice, freedom, and dignity for all is what human rights work is all about. Last year, the YWCA launched the Westchester Center for Racial Equity with generous support from Westchester County, Regeneron, Nonprofit Westchester, and of course, United Way. The center is a good illustration of the power of collaboration and learning from others. As we were planning the center, we had many conversations, some of them difficult, about what the center was going to do and how we were going to address racism. There was a group of women who came together in the early stages, who I termed Las Madrinas. Some of you are in the audience. In Latina culture, a madrina is a key figure. She's the godmother. I learned very important lessons from the madrinas that helped inform my ever-evolving human rights lens. One lesson is that human rights work is that anti-racism work is very much about recognizing our common humanity, treating people with respect by virtue of the fact that they are human. And the second lesson is that anti-racism work is really about healing and restoring our common humanity. The creation of the center was very much about collaboration. Collaboration focused the human rights lens that we were beginning to use. In the midst of this work, Governor Hochul's office approached me to become the commissioner of the State Division of Human Rights. It was a great honor, but it also was uncanny because I was beginning to see that taking a human rights approach was an important anchor for our work at the YWCA. I was also attracted to the position because New York State had been a leader in human rights for so many years. In 1945, New York State was the first state in the country to pass a human rights law, which prohibited discrimination on the basis of race, color, creed, and national origin. It also was the first state in the country to create an office charged with enforcing such a law, the New York State Commission Against Discrimination, which now has become the Division of Human Rights. The vision of the Division of Human Rights is a New York free of discrimination where everyone could fulfill their potential and participate fully in the life of the state. As many of you know, I loved being the CEO of the YWCA, White Plains and Central Westchester. People said that I bled persimmon. And by the way, the color of DHR is purple. So it was a very difficult decision to leave. I prayed on the decision. Ultimately, I could not resist the opportunity to work for the first female governor of the state of New York, Governor Kathy Hochul, and to be part of her historic administration. It may sound crazy, but one of the factors that I considered was where the office was located. I was surprised to find out that my office was not in Albany. The Division of Human Rights is the only state office located in the Bronx outside of Albany. We're located in Fordham Plaza, 10458. That zip code is actually the zip code of where I grew up. I grew up in the Bronx, 10458, and my mother was a school teacher at PS 205, which is about 5 blocks from the Division of Human Rights. It's many ways, going to the Division of Human Rights was like going home. Growing up in the Bronx, one of my favorite places was the Marshallese Public Library. I don't know if he's here, but I wanted to do a shout out to Terry Kirshner and our Westchester Public Libraries. My father would take us to the library on Saturday mornings, and it was a rite of passage for me and my sisters when we were old enough to write our names in a big leather-bound book in the library, because by printing our names, it signifies that we were old enough to have a library card. At the library, I would always run to find the book Stone Soup by Marsha Brown. I'm not sure why I was so crazy about that book. It's illustrated in black and white, but for some reason, I loved reading it. When Faith told me that today the theme was going to be collaboration, the first thing I thought of was this book. The story is about a group of soldiers who travel to a village, and they're looking for food and a place to rest. The villagers are afraid of them, so they hide in their homes. So the soldiers go to the center of the town, put a big pot over a flame, and put water, and then put a stone in the center of the pot, and they start boiling water. The villagers are looking at this, and they get curious, and they come out, and one of the soldiers says, "Would you like some stone soup?" And the villager looks at him, and then the soldier says, "I think it would taste better if it had some butter or salt in it." So the villager says, "Okay, I'll go get some butter and salt." Then the soldier says, "I think a carrot would be good." Another villager goes and gets a carrot, and then the soldier says, "How about an onion?" Another villager goes and gets an onion. So little by little, every single person in the village has contributed something to this stone soup. And by now the soup is smelling delicious. So the soldiers then pour a bowl of soup for everyone, and then the people in the village say to them, "Would you like to stay at our house?" They say yes, they rest, and then in the morning they leave the town. So stone soup is a metaphor for collaboration and uplifting humanity. The story still resonates with me today, and I'm not alone. You would be surprised. I was shocked when I Googled stone soup and saw how much has been written about it. There's even a conference, the Stone Soup Conference, where a foundation brings people together and use lessons from stone soup to talk about issues that they're currently facing. So today, I wanted to borrow from their approach and propose lessons from stone soup to show how nonprofit leaders can collaborate to advance human rights. But first, I have to define for you what I mean by human rights and what it means to take a human rights approach. Human rights are, in essence, the hopes and dreams of people for a better world. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights was signed in 1948 by all of the members of the United Nations. It was in direct response to the atrocities from World War II. The Universal Declaration sets forth 30 freedoms and rights that belongs to all of us. And it starts with the recognition that all human beings are born free and equal in dignity and rights. It goes on to include the right to freedom from slavery, the right to free speech, the right to education, the right to civil and political participation, economic rights, including the right to a job and fair salaries, as well as the right to housing, health care, and food. Everyone is entitled to these rights by virtue of being human. They are universal. They apply to all, and they are indivisible. You can't have one human right without the other, and all are necessary. Can you imagine what life would be like if we all lived according to the principle that we're all born free and equal in dignity and rights? 10 years after the signing of the Declaration of Human Rights, Eleanor Roosevelt gave a speech at the United Nations that became famous. It became famous because it was the first time somebody said that human rights aren't just international, but human rights are local. Where, after all, do universal human rights begin? In small places close to home, so close and so small that they cannot be seen on any map of the world. Such are the places where every man, woman, and child seeks equal justice, equal opportunity, equal dignity without discrimination. Unless these rights have meaning here, they have little anywhere. As Eleanor Roosevelt suggests, nonprofit leaders must recognize that you are important actors in the advancement of human rights. So, a human rights approach puts people center stage. It focuses attention on who is suffering most, why, and what can be done about it. A human rights approach could guide nonprofit leaders on how to use your power to advance humanity. A human rights lens calls for a focus on the most marginalized. It may even reveal issues of discrimination at nonprofits. For example, the differential treatment of people in leadership positions, especially women of color. As Jane McPherson writes, a human rights lens enables those who work at nonprofits to see rights rather than needs, see right holders rather than charity seekers, see human rights violations rather than individual pathologies. A human rights approach is about a redistribution of privilege and power. A human rights approach is a call to action that must guide and motivate nonprofit leaders. So I said I was going to talk about Stone Soup and the lessons, and to show how the lessons from Stone Soup could help nonprofit leaders advance human rights. Here are some lessons taken from Stone Soup for how nonprofit leaders, through collaboration, can be better, more effective leaders and can advance human rights. Lesson number 1, provide the stone. Don't forget that the soup that fed an entire village started with a stone. As nonprofit leaders taking a human rights approach, you need to believe in your ideas and ideals, no matter how audacious. You need to believe that you can make soup from a stone. Lesson number 2, be inclusive and strive for community empowerment. The stone was the spark, but the soup was richer through the contributions of many. Respecting people's human dignity means respecting their self-determination, empowering their ability to make decisions for themselves. As nonprofit leaders taking a human rights approach, you should make sure that all of those who are affected by issues are at the table when solutions are being discussed. Lesson number 3, cultivate and nurture others' leadership. Part of the job of being a leader is to nurture other leaders, including those who may be different. As nonprofit leaders, you must be willing to ensure that all have the opportunity to participate fully without facing discrimination. That's basic to having a human rights approach. If you foster the leadership of those who are viewed as others, such as people of color, those who are LGBTQIA+, trans, or people with disabilities, you are actively advancing human rights. If you witness discrimination and just stand by, you are complicit in not advancing human rights. Lesson number 4, look for broader social and systems change. Collaboration is transformational. The soldiers were able to turn a simple stone into a soup that fed an entire town. Similarly, as nonprofit leaders, when you embrace collaboration, you greatly leverage your own efforts to achieve broader systems change. When nonprofits collaborate, the potential for impacting human rights is exponential. Lesson number 5, don't forget about well-being. After preparing the stone soup, the soldiers rested. A human rights approach that we must recognize our own humanity. We're people, not machines. People cannot be expected to advance change if they are unsupported or burnt out. Admittedly, this is a hard lesson for me to model. The COVID pandemic isolated us, exhausted us. Many of us had to deal with personal grief, death, and loss. We need to make time for ourselves to replenish. It is part of our humanity. We also must make time as a community to heal. Today, nonprofits are facing numerous challenges. COVID has taught us that we can't go back to normal. As writer Sonia Renee Taylor has said, normal never was. We should not long to return, my friends. We are being given the opportunity to stitch a new garment, one that fits all of humanity and nature. It is the time now more than ever that a human rights approach is needed to navigate through this crisis. It is a time now more than ever for nonprofits to collaborate and design a new garment. It is a time now more than ever for the new garment to be sewn with a human rights stitch. When nonprofits combine forces and collaborate, they can advance the cause of human rights. Let's choose to connect and embrace a global vision where we see our lives connected to those of others and respect each other's humanity. Thank you so much for listening, and I'm going to close, as I close everything and learning from this morning, with my daily affirmation. Strong alone, fearless together, or as I say now at the Division of Human Rights, fearless alone, stronger together. Thank you so much.